I'm an Irish. Hello and welcome to Chrissy D Show with me, Chrissy D. It's story time today. Doing something a little bit different. So you subscribers, you can just jog on. Don't need you. No, I'm kidding. I love that you're subscribed to me, and thank you. I'm going to talk about what it's like as an Irishman living in England, because I've lived in England quite a while now. You know, for those of you thinking of moving to England or you want to know what it's like, this video could also be for people who just want to know what it's like from my perspective as an Irish guy living away from home. What's that like? That poor Irish dude having a tough time, or is it a good time? Stay tuned. Also, it could be for you Irish people that are thinking of moving away. You know, what's it like in England specifically? And what can I gain? I think mainly today I'll be talking about the social aspect and the work life aspect. So I'm a guy who was actually born in England, moved to Ireland when I was 5 years old, then moved back to England to study university, moved back to Ireland, and then I moved back here 8 years ago, and I've been living here ever since. So even though I've spent most of my adult life living in England, and I was even born in England, I'm not accepted as an English person because of my accent and because I was in Ireland since from the age of 6 to the age of 19. Now, this brings up a whole other discussion, which I might deal with some other time. But today I'm going to be dealing with my own experiences in England, specifically relating to Irish stereotypes. Now, we're very lucky as Irish people to have been granted stereotypes that aren't the worst thing. Most Irish people in modern media are depicted as lovable, friendly people whom probably drink a lot. They're also quite regularly depicted as simple, happy-go-lucky types who are being a bit crafty and, of course, having the luck of the Irish. Whatever that means. Check out any Rockstar game for a reference.
Irish. Tie them. Where are you? Oh, who do you want? I see you. Get away from me.
Right here. Where's that machine gun, Irish?
Oh, Mr. Marston.
Now, this isn't a bad hand to be dealt, as I've learnt from being away from home for so long. When people inevitably judge you upon first meeting you, it can make for an easy default conversation along the lines of, "Haha, you sound like a man who likes his whiskey," and "well done in the rugby, by the way." I don't actually watch rugby. Or the classic,
"Oh my God, are you Irish? I love the Irish so much."
When after some further short exchanges about Ireland, you realise that they don't know anything about Ireland except potatoes and leprechauns. Which is fine. I'm not insulted by the idea that you don't know anything about where I'm from. That'd be ridiculous. But why are people so compelled to tell you that they love the Irish? I don't know. I just don't know yet. I'd like to clarify that this stereotyping and what I'm about to go into is very different from the very bad and awful racism that people suffer on a daily basis. But what we're talking about here is positive racism, or to categorise it more accurately, benevolent prejudice. That is, taking your own preconceived notions of what person I must be based purely on knowing where I'm from and applying that with positive intentions. Now, I've had quite a good experience with benevolent prejudice for the most part, but this also causes problems and gets a bit weird from time to time. When you start to deviate from the subconscious wishes of the group, it can get downright rude, in fact. I remember being at a house party and meeting a new group of people. After going through the usual benevolent prejudice routine, the group got back to talking. The subject was university and the experiences everyone had, specifically about living with other students and the stress involved. There was a break in the chat, and I recalled a story of my own student life where none of the housemates could agree on whose turn it was to take out the kitchen bin, so it remained unemptied for weeks. The waste was actually piled to head height and spilling down onto the floor, filling most of the kitchen, until one day me and a friend caved and dealt with it. However, we were normally the ones that took out that bin in a house of 6 other students, so that injustice just continued. Some of the group recoiled at the details of the bin story but seemed to enjoy my contribution. One guy asked, "Where did you study?" And I said, "England." He nodded and said to me, unironically, "I guess they don't have college and university in Ireland." The group gasped as he continued, "Well, every Irish or Scottish person I've met has always studied in England. We do have colleges and universities in Ireland." And this was not an isolated event. I have straight up met people that could not believe that I have A-levels and an honours degree. Not that that makes anyone more intelligent over anyone else. I've worked with people that had GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, but could not point out the continent of North America on a map, or had no idea that the Second World War happened within the last 100 years, stating, and I quote, "Wasn't that like 500 years ago?" This is one of the downsides of the Irish stereotype. The happy-go-lucky, simple, uneducated alcoholic is an image that genuinely trickles down into the subconscious of people here in England, making them believe, for instance, that our education system is not as rugged as the English one. I do have further substantial anecdotal evidence to suggest otherwise, by the way. The stereotype is something that I have had to fight to get away from sometimes. I've even had a few people, when meeting me, and this isn't exclusive to England, make jokes about how I'm going to probably leave a bomb in their car because, you know, terrorism is hilarious. It's not hilarious, it's absolutely horrendous. For those of you that don't know, this joke is based on the Troubles in Ireland, where terrorist acts were committed on both sides of a terrifying unionist and nationalist argument all across Ireland and beyond. This still causes tension back home today. And this again tends to come from people's ignorance on the subject, which is okay, because knowing every political event in history is a pretty unobtainable feat. But maybe just avoid this topic when you're first meeting an Irish person. That's my advice anyway. Now, don't get me wrong here. In these situations, I'm not the guy that's going to make things really awkward and fight people on this or punish people for not talking to me in the most proper of ways. I love meeting new people and will always do what I can to embrace the social situation as it presents itself. Part of the magic of meeting a new person is the uncertainty of what will happen. And I happen to enjoy having a sense of humour, also arguably part of the Irish stereotype. But I also think I'm a bit of a weird Irish guy, and a lot of Irish people would certainly take great offence to being compared to a terrorist. Not that I find it directly complimentary. Paddy. In one particular place of work here in England where I was employed as a kitchen porter for almost 3 years, I gained the nickname Paddy within the first shift. Not only was I known and referred to by all the staff as Paddy, but this was also the case for any of the patrons to the restaurant/bar. It can, however, be used in an affectionate way, and I do believe that this was, for the most part, the way the nickname was used. But even if that is the case, it still comes with certain appendages and expectations based on Irish stereotypes. It also just pigeonholes you socially. I remember telling this to my auntie at the time, who is of Irish descent. She was really outraged, absolutely livid that I was being called Paddy at work, because I guess she's the generation before me, and it was certainly used more in a derogatory way than anything else. When I was called Paddy, I had two choices, as does anyone that gets picked on or singled out. You either get behind the joke and go with it, or you say, "Hey, don't you call me Paddy, you English." Now, the latter sends a very clear message. I don't want to be called that, and if you call me that, it's going to piss me off. Now, this can work if you have any kind of social power or status and can set a clear boundary for that person not to cross, but it can backfire and make things actually much worse if the request isn't accepted. Now, saying as the person calling me Paddy was my new boss at a new job that I needed to pay bills and eat food in a place far away from home, and merely the fact that I'm usually quite easygoing with all this kind of stuff, I decided to just get behind the joke. And it worked really well for me, and I made lifelong friends at that job that I'm still in touch with. There were occasional downsides, though, inevitably, with being branded so directly with the Irish guy tag. If you've ever worked in the hospitality industry, you'll know that your life becomes your work and your work becomes your life. Your social life all gets fluffed into the same thing. Due to the later hours you work and all the weekend work, you end up making a bunch of friends this way, which is really cool. After my shifts, I would sometimes find myself on nights out and at house parties with some really cool, interesting people. I couldn't shake the impression, however, that I was the token Irish guy in the group, the sidekick, the extra buff, or the tome that the adventurers would carry with them to protect them from all the other Irish people. This was evidenced to me by what would follow me contributing to deeper conversations, for example, which would be silence, and then something like, "I love how he says $1 million," or "That must be the whiskey talking there, Paddy." Now, there is every chance that my contribution just wasn't good enough, or at best, less entertaining than my exotic accent. But this, along with other instances, told me it was more me stepping outside of my box rather than actually having nothing relevant to contribute. Random advice. By the way, everyone, meeting another group's Irish person is not as fun for us as you think it is. I've met quite a few Irish people in England, and there comes this strange tension with that comes from a mutual understanding that maybe the Irish person version that you've delivered to your group of English people might not be as legitimate as it seems. Along with the fact meeting another Irish person can just jeopardize your social territory that you've worked so hard to craft with your English subjects. How's it going? Not too bad. How about yourself? Aye, grand. How long you been in England? About 5 years or so? Or what about you? Aye, about 6 years now. Isn't this great? They're just getting along so well. Oh, the two Irish guys. Now, I haven't found anyone in my travels in England that actually hate the Irish, which I am glad of. But I have definitely met people that look down on me or underestimate me because I'm Irish. This kind of social pigeonholing, for the most part, has been harmless. It has caused some problems in the workplace, though. For instance, I remember working at a warehouse job where we had to load heavy-ass boxes from the front of the warehouse to the very back on the second floor. It was a very long warehouse with 2 flights of stairs between the start and end point. There were 4 of us working on this, including the boss. I said it'd be much more efficient if we quickly organise a bit of a chain. In other words, an elongated version of the bucket brigade, as we didn't quite have enough people for a full chain. The boss decided against that, instead opting for us to walk the box all the way to the back of the warehouse and return with empty hands, stumbling past each other as we went. After half an hour with this, I made the request again, getting the retort of, "What would an Irishman know about organisation? Maybe you haven't had enough potatoes today, mate," insinuating that I wasn't physically strong enough to carry out the task this way. Now, this could have just been, ironically enough, a tired, stubborn boss snapping at me, but this wasn't the only time I was ignored at work alongside racial connotations. There are certainly plenty of people that understand I am likely to be more than the initial stereotype and will use it as an in to, start to get to know me. This has been the case for many, many of the English people that I've met. And to any of my friends watching this, you're obviously legends and are excluded from this. Mostly. Gary, stop saying parshar. It is funny though. It is. It's funny. There is a massive plus point that I have not talked about yet. But before I do, hit the like button and comment and, get involved. Talk to me. Identity. Everyone has some kind of identity, some of which is brought on by themselves, but is more likely to have been created by others and others' opinions of you. If you are an Irish person thinking of moving away, moving to England, I can say that one of the best things to happen to me was to gain a real sense of identity. Comparing it to staying at home and not meeting the expectations or whatever bollocks of your neighbours and your peers. Compare it to not being able to say, hey, you know what, I can actually live away from home and survive on my own if I need to. You also very quickly realise that as soon as you move away from home, nobody actually cares or even knows anything about the stuff that stresses us out back home, which is good and bad, but it does bring you a lot of perspective. Those people that were a bit rude or arrogant towards me are not perfect, but neither's anyone, especially me, because I'm Irish. No, that's bad. No. You're lovely, Ireland, and I miss you every day. I am tremendously grateful to the English for providing me with work, freedoms, friendships that will last a whole lifetime, and generally a lot of acceptance. A lot of what I've said today has been the downsides, but I guess that's because those are the stories that generally bring up more interesting stuff to talk about. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the stereotype actually tends to work in our favour a lot more often than not. Because I guess we're just a bunch of wise-cracking, drinking bastards. So that's some of my story. There's more, but maybe that's for another time. I really want to hear your comments and thoughts. Let's get a bit of a chat going. Any of you thinking of moving here, or any of you Irish folks out there that have been travelling, anyone who's met an Irish person and wants to relay that. And I hope wherever you are, or wherever you're going, or thinking of going to, that you have all the luck of the Irish. Also, anywhere you go in the world as an Irish person, you will meet an Irish person. Anywhere on earth, anywhere on the planet. You go to Fiji, Bali, Italy, the US, of course, a lot of us over there. Mexico, it doesn't matter. Japan, you're going to meet an Irish guy. It's really weird.